Bam. Bam, bam, bam. It says we're live. Uh, that always remains to be seen. I always like to make sure. I like to check with the streams. Okay, I see it coming alive on YouTube, and I'll turn that sound down so I don't get that back. And I'll refresh my Facebook because maybe it's there. All of you watching on Facebook will already know this, but I'm a little behind the times. Let's see here. There we are. It's working. Holy moly. It's been a little while since I've broadcast to both Facebook and YouTube at the same time. So, welcome to all of you. And I know that because we're making this week's studio drop in public, that there will be some people watching that we don't normally have here every week. This is all part of a little thing that I do. I'm going to create this little text overlay right now because I forgot. Let's see, it's Don Ross Guitar Academy.com. Boink. Okay. So you can see there on the screen. I'll put it down sort of at the bottom. That's the URL for my little online teaching academy. And what I have right up there right now is about 40 beginner lessons and 40 intermediate lessons. So I plan to be making more content really soon. The problem is I got really bogged down making this new album, which just came out, an album called Water. It's on the streams, and you can get it on my Bandcamp and all that kind of stuff. But I'll try not to be too commercial in this whole thing. Hi, Kestine, and oh, hello, Six Bars Jail in Florence, Italy. Isn't that lovely to see you guys? Aw, I miss you guys. I hope we can work something out for this fall. I think that's the idea. And let's just check out Facebook. Hi, Earl. Nice to see you there. So what we do here, usually we meet every week and we talk about some kind of guitar-related thingamajig of some sort. It could be an interview with a guitar builder. It could be an interview with a guitar player who's out there being busy in the world of music. Or it could be just me talking about something either very directly or less directly involved with the guitar and guitar playing. And I come at it from a different point of view, perhaps, than a lot of people. I'm not as much about, the lessons on the Guitar Academy are very hands-on, here's how you do it kind of thing, takes you through the steps. But my overall view is it comes from more the point of view of a musician slash composer slash instrumentalist slash singer slash recording artist slash touring person, all that kind of stuff. So I try to come to it from a more well-rounded approach in terms of like a musical approach rather than just a guitar-based approach. Because the big problem, I think, with making it too much about the instrument is that a lot of stuff gets glossed over or a lot of stuff gets lost. People don't really talk about music so much as about, frets and strings and woods and all that kind of stuff. So, hi, Dennis. Welcome from Germany. And yes, so what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this week is the concept of intonation and temperament. Now, that is it's a pretty nerdy topic for sure. But it's actually not just nerdy. It has very, very interesting and daily repercussions on your playing on any instrument, whether it's the guitar or the piano or the violin or your voice or whatever it is. Oh, isn't that nice, Beverly? You got the CD today or this week in your mailbox. That's fantastic. A lot of people ordered the new CD, obviously, as part of my Kickstarter and also on my website. So, intonation and temperament are a separate issue from things like reference pitch. These days, there's been, if you're a musician and you are on YouTube or Facebook with any regularity, you may have come across this whole 432 hertz business that's been circulating lately. And that is nothing more than the result of essentially a conspiracy theory. So That's a different topic altogether from what we're going to talk about today, but I will touch on it quickly because it always comes up. People always have questions about this. Now, 432 hertz is a reference to the to the reference pitch that we use for tuning our instruments. Now, the reference pitch that we use internationally is 440 hertz, being the A above middle C. So if you go to middle C on a piano and you go to the A above that, so specifically it's this pitch. Okay, so that's 440 hertz if you're tuned to the international reference standard. And that's all there is to it. Okay, and that's it. It's just a standard. It's just like saying a certain shade of blue is number 437H or whatever, or that we're going to use this kind of paint on our highways with this formula and this brightness. And I mean, that's all it is. It's not saying that one is better than the other. It's not saying that there's an absolute right or wrong on how to do anything. It's just that for many, many, many centuries, there was no standardization of what we're going to tune to. And it wasn't really until we had tuning forks and all this kind of stuff, and then people started saying, well, we should probably agree on something. Just like we eventually all agreed, okay, let's make there be international standard times, right? Like, so for example, I'm coming where I'm sitting right now in Prince Edward Island, Canada, it's 2:06 p.m. or 14:06. Okay, so that's a different time from almost anywhere else because it only applies to Atlantic Canada and parts of Brazil and Central America and stuff like that. This little strip goes down the world, but everywhere else in the world, most places, it's 6 minutes after something, right? Except in places where they do the half-hour thing, like in Newfoundland or in India or places like that. Anyway, all 440 is a reference pitch. That's all it is, nothing more, nothing less. It has nothing to do with Nazis, has nothing to do with the Soviet Union trying to control our minds, has nothing to do with anything, okay? And if you decide that you want to tune your guitars or any instrument to 432 instead of 440, you go right ahead and do that. Nobody's going to stop you. The only problem you may run into is when you play with other people, and if people are using tuners, or if you're trying to play along with instruments that have been calibrated on a computer to play at 440, it's going to be problematic. But there's nothing mystical or magical about 432 hertz, so just get that out of your head, okay? But that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is intonation and temperament. So when you tune your guitar, you have probably had this experience, because I certainly grew up with this, not really understanding what the problem was. But you'll notice that your guitar tends to sound really, really great and in tune sometimes, and other times kind of meh, not so great. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Okay, so some of it is the physical properties of the instrument, some of it has to do with our tuning system, and then, it can be influenced by all kinds of other things. If you play a guitar, for example, your strings might get old and start playing out of tune. Your guitar might not be set up well, so it goes out of tune up the neck or something like that. There's also things like if you play a note and you just keep your finger really straight, no problem, you'll get a tone. But if you do this, you're pulling it sharp or pushing it flat. That's to do with technique. Sometimes people press too hard or they pull the strings back and they start getting out of tune as they play. So those are all issues that have to be dealt with over the course of your life as an instrumentalist, as a guitarist. But there's the simple fact that when you try to tune your guitar, you run into impediments, you run into problems with tuning. And these are all to do with physics, nature, and then our tendency as human beings to want to harness our sound palette and divide it up and to make sense out of it so that we can manipulate it, right? So I'm going to show you something really quickly here. Oops, I see that my video has stalled. I'm trying to figure out why. I think maybe you can still hear me. I'm not sure why I have stalled on the video side. That's really interesting. Okay, sorry, you can tell it's live, right? What I might do is restart my camera software. Oh no, there we go. We seem to be back on track. I don't know what happened there, but we froze up for a second. I apologize. And we should be back up. You should see me by now talking more reasonably. There we are. Okay. We seem to be back to normal everywhere. Okay, cool. Now, if you go to tune your guitar, this is something that you may have noticed in the past, okay? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to tune my 2 outside strings to a tuner, okay? So, and I'm going to stay in standard tuning. The outside strings, of course, are tuned to the pitch class E. Now notice I said pitch class, not pitch. Okay, pitch is absolute. When I say pitch, I'm talking about a specific frequency. If I talk about a pitch class, I'm talking about the idea of E, for example. Okay, it can be this E, it could be this E, it could be this E, okay, it could be this E. There's a bunch of E's you can play on the guitar in standard tuning that are very accessible. Those are all E, but they're all in different octaves, right? So that's the concept of pitch class when I talk about the pitch class of E, all right? So I'm going to tune my bottom string to my tuner here. My tuner will just cooperate. I'll try tuning the high E, okay? It's cooperating with this one. So that says it's an E, all right? I'll believe it. The battery must be low in my tuner because it's not tracking the low E. I'll just use my ears then. Okay, those 2 E's sound pretty good to me. Those are the E on the 6th string, the low one, and the E on the high string. Okay? And this E in absolute pitch is, excuse me, is the E just above middle C. Okay, that's how it sounds. So that's if you play the piano or you want to compare. So I'm tuning those 2 E's. They sound pretty decent. Now let's say I want to tune an E major chord. And I want to make it so that it sounds really nicely in tune to my ears, just using my ears only, okay? So those 2 E's sound pretty good. Now this is a B, so this B is what's called a 4th below the high E, which is a very consonant, very easy to listen to interval, okay? That sounds pretty good. I can go with that. So since we have this B in tune on the open 2nd string, I can tune this B, which is an octave lower, to that note. So what I'm doing is I'm fingering the A string, the 5th string at the 2nd fret. It's already pretty darn close. So, okay, great. And then the 4th string is a D. If I finger that at the 2nd fret, I should get an E. So it sounds, again, like pretty good. I just picked the guitar off the stand here a minute ago, so I'm surprised it's this in tune. Getting this as close as I can. Great. And then the G, okay, this open G note, I'm going to use the G sharp that's normally in an E major chord. Okay, because I want the E major chord to sound really killer, right? It feels a little sharp to me, so let me just see here. Ooh, that sounds nice. Okay, so that's a very in tune sounding E major chord, rather, to me. E major sounds really nice. All right, watch what happens when I play a G major chord. Listen to this. Whoo, Nelly. That's terrible sounding. Same guitar, okay. Haven't changed the tuning. There's E, okay. Here's G. Yikes. What does C sound like? Terrible, wretched, awful, right? Now E sounds good. A should sound okay-ish. Not bad. Now the reason why E and A should both sound okay, if I've really tuned well by ear to E, then that A chord, because it's in the same kind of range in terms of key signature and stuff like that, like E has 4 sharps in its key signature, A has 3, then you have a lot of pitches in common, all right? And so when I play the E and then I play the A, it should sound not too badly. Now G is pretty far from E. G only has one sharp. Okay, otherwise it's all naturals. And then you start getting into this whole different key center. Now, you would think to yourself, okay, but if you've tuned your guitar by ear so it sounds really good in one chord, why doesn't it sound good in the other ones? The reason is the way that we use intonation in our tuning system. Okay, now intonation is a very interesting thing to talk about, as is temperament. But probably of those two ideas, the most important one to talk about is temperament. Now, what is temperament? Temperament is simply when you make compromises to the tuning. All right, so for example, if we were to tune so that everything sounded yummy in an octave, all our intervals sounded really, really in tune, then we'd probably be fine if we only played music that played one note at a time, or that always had an unmoving drone and then melodies on top of it. Okay, let's get back to that in a minute. I just want to deal with a couple of your comments just to see who's here. Really nice. Stonehouse Tales. Been a huge fan for years. I didn't know you streamed. Yes, I do. In fact, I do it every single week on Don Ross Guitar Academy. Too cool to be true. Thank you, Siddharth. Prodigal Nation. Every time someone talks trash about modern fingerstyle house and dude loops their strings instead of clipping them or somehow posers, I send a video of you and let it speak for itself. Oh, you're sweet. Isn't that funny how the loop string thing? Why do people even worry about stuff like that? That's got to be another weird conspiracy theory thing. All right. So yes, Prodigal Nation is terrible sounding. It is. This is terrible sounding. All right. So what we have in nature, okay, are sounds, and we can listen to those sounds and we can hear in the sound of any instrument playing a note, okay, you can hear a set of harmonics that are happening at the same time. Now, harmonics happen every time you play a note. When you play a note, you get the very strong first harmonic, which is also called the fundamental. So when I play this low E, okay, you think of that as sounding like la, there's the note, right? That's E, okay? But if you listen carefully, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on there, right? There's all kinds of other tones that if you train your ear, you can really listen for them and hear them. Now you can, on the guitar, you have the advantage of being able to find them quite easily as harmonics on the string. So for example, the full length of the string sounds that note, that E. At the halfway point, the exact halfway point on the string, which is where the 12th fret is, you get what's called the second harmonic, and that is an octave above the first harmonic, the open string. Okay, so you've got the E, and then at the 12th fret, you got an exact octave above, okay? And then you get another one here at the 7th fret that is an octave and a fifth above, okay? So by a fifth, I mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth note of a scale. Okay, so we got one, we got the octave, and then we got the octave, 2, 3, 4, 5, that note, okay? And then at the 5th fret, you've got another one there. That's 2 octaves above the open string. And then you got this weird one at the 4th fret, which is 2 octaves and a major third and a tiny bit more higher than the open string. Okay. Then at the 3rd fret, you got the 5th above that. You got the 2 octaves and a fifth above the open string. And then you got this really weird one here, sort of halfway between the 3rd and 2nd frets. It's a flat 7. So if this is an E, this is a D flat. Oh, sorry, there, but a slightly flat D flat. Okay. And then finally, you get another one here, just above the 2nd fret. And that's 3 octaves above the open string. And then you can keep going. Okay, so all those really, really, really high notes are there all the time, even when you play that one note by itself. Okay, you're just playing one string, but you get all these harmonics above it as well. And they're always there. Okay. Now, the way that the guitar sounds with its harmonic sort of properties, that's what gives the guitar its timbre. Right? So timbre means basically the tone of an instrument, the way that you can tell that's a guitar and not a flute or a trombone, right? If you take the attack off if you take a recording of a guitar and take the attack off, it becomes a little harder to tell it's a guitar, believe it or not. The attack is part of the timbre, right? Same if you take a piano and cut the attacks off. Sometimes it sounds like a bunch of saxophones all playing at once. It's quite weird. But it's a combination of the attack of the note plus the harmonic series and other properties that makes a guitar, for example, sound like a guitar. Okay, so when you hear these harmonics happening, those are always there. And what we want to do normally, if we want things to sound in tune, we want to tune so that the harmonics and the open string and the next string that we're trying to tune, for example, all sound bang on. So that's why very often you see guitarists tuning using harmonics, like they'll do that because it works out, because the guitar is tuned mostly in fourths, right? The bottom two strings are a fourth apart. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, they're 4 notes of a scale apart. So since you're tuned in fourths, it works out that this harmonic here, which is the fourth harmonic, I guess, on that string, and the third harmonic in this string are the same pitch. Okay, they're that E that's 2 octaves above this open string. Okay, this one and that one. So very often you'll see guitarists tune in harmonics. Now that gets you started okay. Okay. The problem is once you start tuning in so that your harmonics line up all the time, you'll find that other intervals don't necessarily harmonize well. Okay. And so that phenomenon, though, of tuning by harmonics, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create essentially a kind of just intonation. Okay, so let's bring that term up. I've got a few little overlays here to make my points. Okay, so just intonation right over my face. Hello. All right. So just intonation is a term that we use for so-called natural tuning. Okay, so if you want to tune your two notes together or whatever so that they sound perfectly in tune. Now, what you end up using are what are called pure intervals. Okay, so for example, this is a pure octave. Sounds right on. Okay. Now, another way that we could tune would be like, let's say I want this note, and the way I tuned originally by ear was I tried to make it so that note was exactly, in this case, a fifth above the lower note. Now, when I listen to it, I realize that I've already done some compromising so that it'll all sound great together. Because now, to my ear, that fifth sounds a little flat. To me, it sounds like this wants to come up a tiny bit. Okay, the reason why, there's a harmonic here. Okay, so that harmonic at the 7th fret on the open bottom string, that is a B note, all right? And I'm trying to tune a B. So there will be a very strong harmonic of that note here. And that's the exact pitch, same pitch as this. So what I'm trying to do ultimately is by listening carefully, I'm trying to get this note and this note to sound exactly right, to sound exactly in tune. But I'm doing it by means of the 5th interval. So that sounds really weird, but I'm tuning an interval of that higher note so that it's in tune with a harmonic. I'm tuning a harmonic of that higher note so that it's in tune with a harmonic of the lower note. Okay, so just intonation uses that throughout, basically. Now, the problem you run into with just intonation is that most just intonation systems are based on pure intervals. And there is a pure interval system of tuning that goes a long way back, okay? And it's called Pythagorean tuning. And it's a system where you use only pure fifths. Now, part of this whole 432 hertz conspiracy theory thing is that people conflate reference pitch with temperament and tuning, and they're two different things. They have nothing to do with each other, really. And a lot of people throw out Pythagorean tuning because they've heard of it, as something that proves 432, which it doesn't have anything to do with. So don't even go there. But these two concepts of just intonation and Pythagorean tuning are very, very closely related. I'll bring up another overlay here, which maybe will show you what I mean. Okay, so here, this all looks very mystical and magical, doesn't it? But what this is, it's the circle of fifths, okay? So if you start at a pitch, let's say you start at C, and then you play a pitch that's a fifth above that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the G, okay? So you can see if you go from that C at the top of the circle, okay, and then you go down and to the left there, you hit a G, that's what we're doing. We're going up a fifth to G, okay? And then from G, you go up a fifth to D. I'm out of tune already, and then from D to A to E, and all the way through the entire circle, you'll eventually hit C again. Now, Pythagorean tuning uses pure fifths in the tuning. If you stack pure fifths, each of the fifths will sound great. And as you go through, it often sounds pretty good as you go through. But then you'll start to notice as you go through more and more fifths that once you get back to C again, you've gone sharp. You've gone sharp by about 24 cents. So that's called the Pythagorean comma, believe it or not. There's a name for it, okay? And so that Pythagorean comma poses a problem, because if we tune only using pure intervals, then we end up with these problems where intervals don't actually quite work out sometimes, even though they're pure, right? Like for that example. There's another kind of tuning which I'm less familiar with, and it's called quarter comma mean tone. Okay, so a mean tone, the tuning is based on pure thirds. And then quarter comma, what that means is you're taking the comma that results from tuning in perfect thirds, pure thirds, and then you're having to temper it. Now, just keep that in mind. I've talked about a lot of things all at once, but watch a little bit of this video. This is really kind of cool. This is a video of an organist talking a little bit about mean tone temperament. So he explains it in the first few minutes here. I'll just let the first 3 or 4 minutes run.
So the instrument here is has the temperament quarter comma mean tone. And what does this mean? It means that it favors the major thirds. So we have pure major thirds, where we hear no undulations. And this is the same in all the major keys, like we have there we have a problem. If we go the other way around, F major, we encounter the problem when we get to 4, we would say, accidentals. But it means that you have in all the church modes the major thirds. There is no problem when you compose in that range. However, when we do that, move into major and minor tonality and modulate, it starts to becoming a little bit of a problem. Now, how is this temperament constructed? What does quarter comma mean tone mean? Well, acoustically, if we tune fifths pure from C, 4 fifths, we get to E. And I will take the Bab-5, which I have retuned. when I play this now, the major third is not pure. It is not like
See, so he made my point for me there. He was showing you that when you, one of his stops was all pure fifths. So when he played the notes going, one, then up a fifth, up a fifth, up a fifth, he ended up in an E. Okay, so he didn't do the whole circle of fifths, obviously, because he doesn't have enough keyboard. But from C to E, that third should sound lovely, and it sounds terrible. It sounds sharp, right? When he tuned that mean tone, quarter comma mean tone, the first example, all the parallel, all the major thirds sounded beautiful. They sounded pure, except for one. The one that he pointed out was because once you get outside the notes, like for example, if you tune to only the white notes, then the white notes on a piano or an organ, they'll all sound lovely if you tune in pure intervals. And then once you start adding accidentals, it starts getting more and more out of tune. So this led to the phenomenon where, for many, many years, keyboard players were struggling between like, do I tune in just intervals, or do I somehow temper the tuning? So very often, people would have, say, a harpsichord in their music room, and they'd have the harpsichord tuner come, and they'd say, "Well, I guess I really like playing in F major a lot, F major, D minor, B flat." And the tuner would say, "Great, okay." With that in mind, they would tune your harpsichord so that the thirds and the fifths, which are the intervals that we use the most often, sounded really good in the key of F, right? And so if you played something that was very diatonic in F, that didn't use a lot of accidentals, didn't suddenly change key to the key of D major or something like that, it would sound wonderful. It would sound great, but you had a very limited palette of harmony to deal with. What started to happen is in the middle part of the last millennium, music started getting more and more chromatic, and people started getting more and more into changing keys and stuff like that. And so then with chromatic music, the problem there is that if you're using only just intervals, you run into this problem like the gentleman there just showed you on the organ, where suddenly the intervals are no longer good sounding. And because they're fixed on a keyboard, you can't just suddenly change it like you can with your voice, or on the violin where you move your fingers slightly up or down to raise or lower the pitch. You can't do anything about the pitch. It's fixed. It's done, right? Those pipes, you can't suddenly make them longer or shorter. Harpsichord, you can't suddenly get in there with your tuning hammer and start changing the tuning. Same with the piano. So when there were more and more fixed pitch instruments like the piano and the harpsichord and the organ, and then fretted instruments like the viol, the viol rather, the viol was a fretted version of the violin, and the viola da gamba still uses movable frets. So the when fretted instruments became very, very common, eventually the idea of tempering the tuning became much more necessary, because you couldn't constantly be changing where your frets were. That said, there were instruments with movable frets. I just mentioned the viola da gamba. And the viola da gamba is kind of a specialty early music instrument. Even to this day, people still play it. You usually see it in early music ensembles. Or there's a German woman, Hilla Perl is her name, and she plays even modern music on the viola da gamba. Pretty cool. But the bottom, I don't know, is it the bottom fourth or the bottom fifth on a viola da gamba is fretted. It's kind of in the cello range. You play it like a cello between your knees. But you, depending on what key you're playing in, you can alter where the frets are, because they're gut frets, and you can just move them a little bit so that you sound better in certain keys, you see? So what you're doing on the fly is that you're essentially, with fixed pitch, you're adjusting to the temperament of whatever key you have to play in, right? And if you're playing along with instruments that have a lot of like infinite pitch possibilities, where you can change the pitch with your fingers or with your voice or whatever, those players might be tending to play a little bit closer to just intonation, but not always. But you can always change your frets to adjust. I'm going to look at your comments. Um, Glad you think it's interesting, Castine. Thanks very much. Hi, Stealth Parrot, Stephen. Sorry you're late. That's okay. You can always watch this on replay if you want to. Um, Now, there's a question. Okay. Uh, Brian Phillips says, I often tune to the beats two notes will create where their waveforms coincide. I also tend to tune my G just ever so slightly flat because it tends to go sharp. Works for me. Yes, it will, depending on what key you're playing in. Now, this also sort of brings up the question of altered tuning. One of the reasons, as quite a young person, I took to altering my tuning, a lot of it had to do with playing in different keys and finding that playing in different keys became frustrating if I only stayed in standard tuning. So, as I've often illustrated to people, my first altered tuning was just taking standard tuning, and because so many songs went same four chords in every song, C, A minor, F, G. I got sick and tired of holding this string down all the time, so I thought, well, why don't I just tune it to that note? So I got this little C chord on the top. I didn't know what I was doing. I just thought it sounded cool. And then I could go. The G chord sounded really neat, weird and neat. I really liked it. Kind of that. There's a Crowded House song that uses that. Anyway, whatever. So that first altered tuning, the raising the second string to a C, it made the fingering of the chords a lot easier, but also it sounded really good in the key of C to have that note be like rock solid. Now, with altered tunings in other contexts, for example, my piece, The First Ride, that's a really great example. It's based on open C tuning, okay, which is normally C, G, C, G, C, E from low to high. And what I did for that particular song is I really wanted the low note to be an F so that I could get the fourth note of the scale. Okay, when you're in C, C, D, E, F. Okay, so I wanted that note as an open string. And I really wanted the A string to play an A so that I could play the A minor chord. So the tuning ended up being F, A, C, G, C, E. Okay, so not too far from standard tuning. Now, if I get it so that it sounds really good with open strings, see that C chord on the top sounds pretty nice, and then get the C, so that sounds decent. Okay, so my first ride starts. I currently don't have any artificial nails, so I can't quite get there. Now here's where I ran into problems every single time on every guitar I ever played. That high C at the 8th fret on the first string is flat, okay? Every single time, on every guitar. Why? The answer is this third between the second string and the first string, the C and the E, that major third, I got it so that it sounds pretty nice, right? As an open set of strings. The problem I have is that I used my ears and I'm thinking, because we tend towards just intonation, we want things to sound in tune with nature. That sounds really nice. If I finger almost any note, they start getting out a little bit. The G's a little flat for my liking. Okay, and then the tonic's really flat. Okay, so it's no work. So what I do is I compromise and I tune that top string a little bit sharp, so that when I go to play that note, which is a really vital note in the tune, I've got it so that it sounds a lot more in tune. Now that means, of course, that when I play it open, it sounds sharp. It does. Okay? This is the reality of temperament. Okay? So all of our tuning systems, anything that's based on a tempered version of just intonation, which is basically every tuning system that we use around the world now, is a compromise from just intonation. The cool thing about the tempered system that we tend to use in the West these days, and it's become universal, everybody uses it all over the world now, it's this one, okay? It's called 12 tone equal temperament, or you can just sort of shorten it to 12 TET. And what you do there is you take the octave and you chop it up into 12 equal bits, okay? On the guitar, you can see it really easily because the open string is here. The octave is at the 12th fret. And that's why, because we've taken the octave and split it up into 12 equal sized bits. They don't look equal because the frets have to get closer to each other physically for the physics and the math to work out. Because, for example, this note, and if you had enough frets, this note here would have to be an octave apart too, and that distance is not the same distance as this, right? So you have to have it so that it's constantly going halfway and halfway and halfway, kind of like that arrow that never reaches its destination. When you think about numbers, right? You're always going half the distance, then you're always going another half the distance, you're going another half the distance. The arrow actually never hits the target. But that's another thing. So you're subdividing into 12 equal bits. And then, so that's based on the idea of the 12th root of 2, basically. You're taking uh, a, a ratio of 1 to 2, basically, and then you're subdividing into 12 bits by doing this 12th root of the number 2. And then, so that's the kind of the arithmetic of it. And then what we do is we use this term cents. Okay, so we subdivide each semitone into 100 cents in the 12-tone equal temperament system. So when you compare the 12 TET system to just intonation or to other tempered systems, you can look at it and say, oh, well, how does it stack up against 12-tone equal temperament? 12-tone equal temperament, every single semitone is exactly 100 cents. So you'll see in other systems, sometimes the interval, the semitone here is only 98 cents, and sometimes it's 104 cents. And, this interval between this and this might be 700 cents in equal temperament, but in this other version of tempered tuning or in just tuning, it might be 727 cents or whatever. So you can see that overall, what 12-tone equal temperament does, it's a big compromise that ends up having intervals in it that are close to just intonation intervals, okay? But they're all out of tune, every single one of them except the octave, okay? So that, for a lot of people, that really bugs them. And I get it. I mean, I understand why it would bother people, but it's so close that our ears got used to it pretty quickly. And there's some of the reading I did in preparation for this, like Encyclopedia Britannica says that 12-tone equal temperament actually became popular with fretted instruments as early as the 16th century. So that's a long time ago. That's 500 years ago. And so already guitars and lutes and mandolins and stuff like that, they were being made with frets that would actually play the octave in 12 equal semitones, right? And then, so you can see here it says 12-tone equal temperament makes each of the semitones the same size, okay? So they're all that 100 cent size. So the entire octave is 1200 cents. And the only remaining so-called pure interval is the octave. And that's the truth, okay? In 12-tone equal temperament, the only interval that's still purely in tune is the octave. If you compare the other ones, the other intervals, you'll see that they are, so comparing intervals and just in intervals, okay, that's me saying the same thing in a different way. But I had another, here we go. No, I already said that. I'm trying to find this other little overlay I had that actually showed you. No, I can't find it. So I must have lost it. Sometimes if I make too many of them, they start disappearing, these little overlays. But I had a little chart that showed you that minor seconds can be a little bit sharp or a little bit flat, depending on which one in just intonation you're talking about, because there are different sizes in just intonation. That's the other thing. You can get a minor second in just intonation that is a little bit smaller than an equally tempered minor second, and there are other ones that are a little bit bigger, depending on where they are on the scale. Same thing with seconds, same thing with thirds. Although, for the most part, a major third in equal temperament tends to sound sharp compared to a justly intoned major third. Like when you saw that video of the organist playing that the tuning that he had, the temperament that he had set up at one point where it was based on pure major thirds. The pure major third sound, those thirds sounded beautiful. They sounded great. They were right in tune. The ratios were exactly right. The ratios are pretty much all very simple, like 3:2, 5:4, 9:8. They're not complicated. They're whole numbers for the most part. And then in equal temperament, they're messier math. They're not the equal. They're not the whole numbers anymore. You get a lot of decimals. Okay, so let me just check your comments here. MD Dunn says, "Hi Don, could you briefly explain the sympathetic deal between frequencies like 440, 220, 110?" Okay, I will. Castine, I'm so glad you're explaining this. You hate all those out of tune moments. You get it right. Hi Corey. Stealth Parrot, I take it this would not be an issue on fretless guitars. Yes and no. Well, we can talk about that too. And Paul, you say this is the next best thing to going back to school for music. That's great. Okay, let's deal with a couple of your comments here. Yes, Mark, you're asking about frequencies that are kind of sympathetic. Okay, essentially what you're talking about there, 440, 220, 110, those are octaves. Okay, so those are like octave transpositions. So, for example, the tuning standard. Okay, I'll get back into standard tuning. Tuning standard tuning. Okay, so I've tuned back now to standard tuning, and that's pretty close there. Yeah, good. I seem to be pretty much in tune with the international standard, 440. All right, so here's 440 hertz. That specific frequency, 440 hertz, is 400 vibrations in the air per second. Okay, sorry, 440 in the air per second. So when something vibrates at 440 times a second, that's 440 hertz. And it vibrates the air at the same frequency, and that's what you hear. You hear the air vibrating at that frequency. Okay, so that's 440 hertz. If I go down the octave to this A, it's half, 220 hertz exactly. Okay, so if they're tuned exactly into a pure octave, this is 440, this is 220. Similarly, if I go another octave down to A, here, the open A, that's 110. All right, and then a bass guitar can go, or a bass fiddle can go another octave below that to 55. Similarly, if I go up in octaves, okay, that's 440. Now, there aren't too many more A's on the guitar above that one. There's this one. Excuse me. My energy drink is coming back to haunt me. All right, that one is 880 hertz. Okay, and that's basically it. It's just multiplying by 2, dividing by 2, right? And yet that's how your frequencies end up working. So that's how octaves work, just multiplying and dividing by 2. So I hope that answers that question. Now, Stephen, your question is that it would not be an issue on a fretless guitar. It would be an issue only in terms of the open strings. So, for example, if you tune your fretless guitar to, geez, it's a really interesting question. I have my fretless guitar over here. Give me a second. Let me see if I can reach over there and grab it. A little spontaneity here. All right. My small group that met last week, you saw me pull this guitar out at one point. I was talking about what we were talking about last week. All right. So this crazy thing, which I haven't really talked much about in public, is a fretless electric guitar. Now let me just plug this guitar in. Come on, baby. Give me a sec. This is really awkward. Be with you in half an hour. All right. Try plugging this puppy in. And then I'll put my headphones on quickly so I can hear what I'm sending you, so I don't blast anybody with this thing. Okay, so this will be very approximate. So here's my fretless electric tuned approximately to standard tuning. Now, I could check with harmonics and get it a little closer. Again, tuning to harmonics is not very, it's not as scientific as it might seem because of equal temperament. And then, all right, it's close enough. So I'm in standard tuning, but then with a fretless guitar, where you actually finger your note, involves infinite pitch. By infinite pitch, I mean there are no frets, so you can alter your tuning of your notes infinitely. So I could call any of those G. It's all approximately G, right? So it's just like a fretless bass or fretless fiddle or whatever. You sort of try to get things in tune. See, I'm sort of playing in G. But I can also play completely microtonally if I want. And get infinite numbers of pitches in the octave, really, theoretically. So on a fretless guitar, it's not a problem in terms of getting, you can play just intervals, you can find them, and because there's no frets. Again, you have to have really good aim. You have to like line up and get your notes right on. I mean, just ask any fiddle player; they'll tell you, playing in tune. That's the thing you work on the most, really. Trying to get it so that you're playing in tune with whatever you're playing with. Now, when you play the fiddle or any other infinite pitch instrument, if you're playing along with a piano player, for example, the piano is tuned, right? And it's immutable. And it'll more than likely be tuned to equal temperament and to 440. So you got to get good at, tuning your instrument well in 440 and then playing the intervals, having your fingerings so that you tend to play in equal temperament. Now, it's really interesting. One of the other things I read in the Encyclopedia Britannica is that you would think that naturally, because we are our physiology is such as it is, and nature works the way it does, and physics being what it is, that when we sing in a choir or when we play a whole bunch of non-fixed pitch instruments together, that we would tend to play just intervals. We would want to sing just intervals among ourselves. Now, I think that happens quite often when you get like two singers singing a cappella, and they're really good singers and they're really good at listening to each other. They try to get their pitches so that they're bang on. Like if they're singing a fifth apart, it sounds like a fifth. If they're singing a major third apart, it sounds like a major third. If they're singing a perfect fourth apart, it always sounds like a fourth. But what they've found through experimentation is if you get a group of musicians together and none of them is playing a fixed pitch instrument, they'll tend to play in equal temperament, okay? Because we've become accustomed to it. We hear it all the time. And so when people start saying things like, "Oh, our tuning system's all wrong" or whatever, that's just propaganda. It's not true. The tuning system we use is just as good as any other tuning system. Just because the intervals are not pure intervals doesn't make them evil, doesn't make them wrong. It just makes them what they are, right? And with an equally tempered system, the whole point of it is that you can play basically any music on any instrument in any key, and it will always sound as in tune in whatever key you play it in. So if you're playing a piece on a piano, let's say that's in the key of D major, yada yada yada, D major, B minor, G, A, F sharp minor, all those chords, and somebody says, "I'd like to sing it, but it feels like it's at like a minor third too low for me." And if you're a good piano player, you say, "Okay, no problem. I'll transpose it to the key of F." And you're playing F, D minor, G minor, B flat, C, A minor, and everything's groovy, right? So you've taken the exact same information, you've moved it, okay, a minor third over on the instrument, which you can also do in the guitar if you're playing G, blah, 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 C, C, D, D, G, G, C, C. Oh no, better play it in B flat, B flat, B flat, E flat, F, B flat, B flat, E flat, F. You can take the same moves, the same information, and just shift it over, right? And you've transposed to another key, and it sounds just as in tune as it did before. That's the goal, right? That's the whole point of temperament. All right. Um, this is another interesting little bit. We talked about fretless guitar and the whole idea that you can play infinite pitch. I got this guitar, I put it together. I bought it off a fellow here on PEI who had made his own Strat copy. I bought the guitar off him. I kept the body, and then I bought a fretless neck from China off eBay. And so it's a regular kind of Strat neck, but with no frets on it. $70. Can't go wrong. But let's just look at this quickly. This is a really interesting idea. This is what's called a microtonal guitar, or a micro tune guitar, however you want to call it. What this player has done is he's taken a form of temperament. This is an early temperament system. This guy, what's his name? Werkmeister was his name. Let's see if I still have it up here. Do I? Yeah, they're here. So Werkmeister was a student of Johannes Sebastian Bach, and he came up with a whole series of tempered tuning systems. So a lot of people think that Bach wrote the Well-Tempered Clavier, which is a series of tunes in all 24 major and minor keys. There's two books of them, so there's 48 pieces. A lot of people think that he wrote it because equal temperament had become all the vogue, by the time he was in his whatever. It was probably the 1730s or something when he wrote this thing. And so everybody thinks, oh, equal temperament was in. And so he did. Well, actually, equal temperament, yes, it was already happening for a lot of people. Not everybody was using it yet. It became much more common in the 19th century when music became very chromatic, and orchestras all had to be able to play it. Every instrument had to be able to play in any key. So then by the 19th century, equal temperament was stamp it. It was for real, right? In Bach's time, there was equal temperament, 12-tone equal temperament, and there were other systems like this system that his student worked out. Now it's called Werkmeister 3 because he actually came up with at least three different versions of tempered tuning. And what the attempt was to take that problem that you have when you stack fifths and you end up going from C up to the C several octaves higher, and it's too sharp because it's out of tune, and you have to take that, what's called a comma, and you have to reduce it by subdividing all the intervals among all the notes by a certain fixed amount to get the equal temperament. Okay, Werkmeister did this a similar idea. It's very convoluted. You should look it up because it's really cool. But you'll see and hear that it's actually pretty close to equal temperament. But what this guy microtonal guitars are very popular in Turkey, and I think it's because they have a lot of instruments that can play microtonally, like the saws and stuff like that. A lot of fretless instruments that are like guitars, and then because of the proximity to Europe, there's a lot of ideas to blend the two traditions. So this fellow, his name is Barak Akan, and he plays Bach on a microtonal guitar. We'll just watch a little bit of this. He's using the Werkmeister 3 equal tempered system. pretty fascinating because that piece, it does quite a bit of moving around in terms of key center and uh, key changes and stuff like that. Um, so in that case, you're going to end up running into issues where you can't always play every note the same way in every key. So the Werkmeister system was pretty close to 12 tone equal temperament. If you look at a chart, you'll see that each note isn't quite 100 cents apart, but it's really close. It's like 98 here, 104 there, kind of thing. And it gets to the point where it becomes pretty imperceptible. Like you have a hard time not you have a hard time hearing any problem with the tuning after a while. Now with Werkmeister, the more I listen to it, the more I can hear. Oh yeah, when it goes to that other key, it's not quite sounding the same way as it would in 12 tone equal temperament, but it still sounds great. It sounds different. It sounds nice. It's another way of tuning the instrument, or of coming up with an intonation system, so that you temper the natural things that are going on. So that's the essence of our tuning system. It's not wrong. Don't let people say it's wrong because it's not. Okay, it's perfectly legit. There have been tempered tuning systems going back centuries. It's not a new idea. The thing is, not playing in a tempered tuning system makes it very limited in terms of what you can do and sound good anymore. The intervals start getting more and more out of tune. So you have to be very careful. That's why I said, back in the day, if you wanted to play an F or D minor or B flat, you'd get your tuner to tune to that key, and you just, forget about playing an A major. It's just not going to happen. Don't do it, right? So those are the problems. So the equal tempered tuning system is an effort to take nature and then just sort of carve it a little bit so that we've worked out all the little issues by making the intervals all a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller than they naturally occur. And then that way, if you want to play in B flat or F or C sharp, or it doesn't matter, just go for it. You can play in any key you want. It'll all be equally out of tune. It's the same with guitars and same with pianos. Now the guitar, as I mentioned, my solution is I fine tune for each piece. I really do. Before I go to play a piece live, I'll mute for a split second. I'll get into the tuning I want, and I'll check a few positions that I know can be problematic if I don't check them. If I only do the open strings or if I only look at my tuner, it ain't going to work, right? So I go in and I do some fine tunings based on what I know historically are the problems that I run into with the tune sounding good. And then I have to, so it won't be exactly right. That's why people say, well, I tuned to my tuner and the guitar sounds bad. Well, it'll sound bad maybe for the key you're playing in. What the tuner will do is it'll get you into this compromised guitar tuning that sounds kind of okay in every key. But like I said, like I illustrated earlier, if you try to get it so it's bang on for one key or one chord, when you play in a very unrelated key, it ain't going to sound good anymore. Yeah, cool. All right, so the microtonal guitar idea, yes, R. Jones. The microtonal guitar idea is it's really interesting. I remember many years ago, but over 30 years ago, being camping somewhere in northern Minnesota, and I met this wild guy who had all these interchangeable fingerboards for guitars and for banjos and stuff like that. And some of them were in tone for dadgad, some of them were in tone for what he called mountain tuning, whatever that was. Some of them were in tone for standard tuning, but if you want to play in the key of E major, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was a magnetic fingerboard system where they actually pulled right off, and then you could put a different one in, and depending on how you're going to tune your guitar. Very laborious, but very interesting on an academic level. I think on a practical level, it's a little bit intractable. I'm going to take a couple more comments, and then we'll finish up. Danilo, nice to see you there from Chile. Hi. Maryse, bonjour. Merci d'être venu from Marseille. Martin Richard, thanks very much for sharing. You're very welcome. Great. Good to see everybody. Check the old Facebook here or YouTube. Great. I think I'm up to date on the comments. So of course I'll just leave this up. It'll be on my YouTube. It'll be on my Facebook fan page. You can always check this on the repeat if you didn't catch it live. And thanks for being here. Oh, R. Jones, you met me at Saunders High School in London, Ontario a while back. I played that place so many times. I think I helped fund their guitar school, their guitar program over the years. Yeah, I did a lot of benefit shows, and also the local cable station played the heck out of some of those performances. I ended up with this really stable fan base in London, Ontario, as a result. Anyway, thanks everybody for being here. It was really nice to be with you today, and thanks for the chance to reach a wider audience this week. It was really nice. And those of you who are already members of the Don Ross Guitar Academy, I'll see you next week. And you can always join up. It's right there. It's easy to sign up. It's a subscription. It's $19.95 US a month. You can do all you can eat guitar lessons and then bugger off if you want, or you can stick around. And one of the fringe benefits is that I'm here every week doing one of these. And we also have monthly guests, luthiers, guitar players, people who are involved in the guitar in some way. So that's always fun too. Sort of the CNN split screen thing going on. All right, Kerstin, thanks for being here. Uh, See you in the fall. I hope so. Yes, I hope so. Bingus, nice to see you. Bluebird123. With tuning up and down so frequently, do you find the strings break often? Yes. So on my regular pitch guitar, I change the strings usually pretty much every show. Yeah, if you're paying for strings, that gets expensive, and at least every second show, for sure, because they'll just break otherwise. All right, thanks for being here, you guys. Talk soon.